Good afternoon. My name is Diane Varga, and I'm with Family Partners of Morrison, Sussex. I welcome you all to this week's Lunch and Learn. Today is August 29th, 2024, and we are excited to have today our speaker today is Belle Ward. She is the Prevention and Education Coordinator with Ginnies House, and she will give a presentation on protecting our youth. Welcome, Belle.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to share, some really great prevention tips, but also kind of what the issue is that we have going on and how to kind of handle those things. So I am going to share my screen and we can get started. Okay. So as Diane mentioned, my name is Belle Ward. I am the Prevention and Education Coordinator for Ginnies House, which is the Sussex County Children's Advocacy Center. The state of New Jersey is lucky enough to have a child advocacy center in all 21 counties of New Jersey. And what a child advocacy center kind of acts as is the hub of child welfare agencies when abuse is suspected or disclosed. So we kind of help take any of the question or guesswork out of finding who families need to get in contact with and things like that during this time for people. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we're going to move on to just what's going to be spoken about today. We're going to talk specifically about the programs that we have at Ginnies House, about medical exams, the prevalence of abuse. Unfortunately, to kind of understand the issue of child abuse, we have to understand what's happening and how it's happening. So we are going to go over that. We're going to go over the grooming process. We are going to go over possible indicators of abuse, disclosures, and how we can kind of change our perspective as adults on disclosures. And then we're going to round out today with some prevention tips as well. And I always like to make mention, this is a difficult topic to discuss. If you feel at all you need to take a break and come back, if it's just becoming a little too much, please do not hesitate to do that. I will not be offended. So we are going to start off by just watching this video to help better understand how a CAC works. This video was put out by the National Children's Alliance, who we are accredited through, and it just gives a good little insight into the process of a child advocacy center.
A Children's Advocacy Center, or CAC, provides support to victims of child abuse. Without a CAC, or CAC, provides support to victims of child abuse. Without a CAC, an abused child may have to tell their story over and over again in settings that may be scary or where kids may think that they're in trouble. Then, families have to search around for the services their children need, all on their own. But in a CAC, a child tells their story to a trained interviewer who makes the process gentle on the child and finds the facts which are crucial to the child's case. Then, a community of professionals in medicine, law enforcement and child protective services, prosecution, victim advocacy, and other heroes work through the CAC to decide the best way to help the child. And CACs provide science-backed mental health care that heals kids from trauma and helps them reclaim their futures. This community of caring professionals rallies around the child so children have everything they need, all in one place, at the CAC. To find your local CAC or to sign up for updates, visit nationalchildren'salliance.org.
Okay, so that video just gives a little insight into what goes on here day to day. And this is kind of our breakdown of what exactly is happening. So we focus on trauma-informed child therapy for children who have either experienced or witnessed abuse or trauma. Luckily for Ginnies House, with us being a nonprofit, we have been able to open up our parameters a little bit more. And we do not just see children who have gone through maybe abuse themselves. We have seen a lot of cases of kids who may have been involved in instances of domestic violence, or divorces, or maybe struggling with parents who have mental health issues of their own, or some kind of substance misuse issues. So those, obviously, at Ginnies House, the children are our focus, and we offer two different types of therapy modalities. We offer TFCBT, which is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. We also offer EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. EMDR is a newer trauma-informed therapy that's being explored, and it has proven to be very, very helpful for some people. And our clinicians are really great at kind of figuring out what's going to work best for the children that come to see us. What's really great too is we are lucky enough to say, once a child of Ginnies House, always a child of Ginnies House. So typically we see our kids anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. But that is not a set in stone, hard and fast rule. Sometimes we see kids who maybe need to take a break during their therapy sessions. It's maybe becoming too much. They need to have a little break and then come back to us later on. Sometimes people need to go longer than the 8 to 12 weeks, and that's okay too. We have even had some clients come back to us in adulthood who, as a child dealt with some abuse, and they came for us for therapy as a child, and now, are becoming a parent themselves, and it has brought up some of those old feelings that they need to work through. So we're really lucky to be able to say that we can help all of those people as well. We also have a family advocacy program. Our family advocate is basically here to kind of help guide the families through this process, making sure that they're understanding what's happening every step of the way, maybe helping to get those parents or families in touch with services of their own. Maybe they are struggling with their mental health as a result of the trauma that their child has gone through. And we can help, kind of put them in place with who can best help them. Forensic interviewing. So at least for Sussex County, any child 13 and under must be interviewed in our building. Our building is very child friendly. It's light, it's bright, it looks like a house. We have a playroom, we have murals on the walls, we have toys, we have books, we have art. It's just a lot less intimidating than a police station. So any forensic interviewing that must be done, as I said, under 13 and under, is done here. Our interview rooms do have video surveillance, and that is to ensure that the child is only having to interact with one plainclothes officer. So they do not need to see all of the other parties that may be here and witnessing the interview and listening in on the interview. That's done in a separate room. The child will not even see where that room is. They come up on a different side of the building. And again, it's just to bring down that intimidation factor that might be there with this kind of a thing. We have also been lucky enough to provide monthly medical clinics. Unfortunately, during a time when abuse is disclosed, most children are going to be referred to the hospital to have a medical exam, whether that's for physical abuse or sexual abuse. You want to have a medical exam done for a child to get a baseline, right? To see what's going on. If there is any evidence that can be gathered through a medical exam, we want to make sure that that's happening promptly. But there is a statute under the Attorney General's office, and the number is escaping me right now, but that any child who is going through a medical exam for abuse is also entitled to a follow-up exam free of charge. So what we have been able to do is hold some of those follow-up exams at our building. So we work with the Audrey Hepburn Children's House. That is our regional diagnostic center. And Dr. Julia DeBellis has been able to come up once a month to perform medical exams in our medical suite at Ginnies House. And it's just, again, it's not a hospital. We are a child-friendly place that just also happens to have a medical suite. I actually have some pictures of what our medical suite looks like. It's very bright colors. It's, there's tons of different things to look at, but it is kitted out just as a typical doctor's office would be. It has the same equipment that Dr. DeBellis would use at Audrey Hepburn House to perform these exams. We have the same equipment up here, and it can be done in the comfort of our building instead of having to go back to the hospital. And on the last wording on that last slide was prevention. And that's kind of where I fall. That's my wheelhouse. And I love what I do. I love being able to get this information out to people and talk about this subject and try and, get away from the taboo-ness of this subject area, because unfortunately, child abuse is happening. And if we're not talking about it, we're making it easier for it to occur, unfortunately. So we're just trying to kind of break those barriers down and just discuss it more and more so that it becomes harder and harder for these things to happen. Okay. So obviously, unfortunately, we have to talk about the issue at hand. The types of abuse that CACs see are physical, sexual, mental, and neglect. There is a bit of a misconception that child advocacy centers only see children for sexual abuse. That is not the case. We do not just see for sexual abuse, but nationally, the highest percentage of cases that are seen at CACs are for sexual abuse. There also has been quite a rise in past years of child-on-child abuse, and it is now being more widely recognized as an issue, which is really great. I'm not going to read you the definition. You can read it yourself, but it is being more recognized as an issue and something that we have to address for both children. So there has been, at least in New Jersey, an initiative started for children who are specifically having child-on-child sexual abuse issues. There is a new initiative that has been started where we are trying to put not only the child victims, but also the acting children in place with services to hopefully get to the bottom and the root of these issues for these problematic sexual behaviors. And the groups that they have had run to completion, they have seen a lot of success with. There's still some kinks that are being worked out. When I say new, I really mean new. It was just kind of put into place in January of this year. So it's something that's still being learned. And unfortunately, a staggering stat that has to be known is that the majority of offenders, adult offenders to children of abuse, are a parent to the victim. Not always, but that's 77%.
That's wild.
Yeah, and it's really upsetting. But you do have to think of it as the fact that these parents do have the most unsupervised access with these kids. And it does bring up a chance for these things to be occurring. Just going a little bit more, unfortunately, child abuse stats are always a couple of years behind, which is really frustrating. But it's just something that we are dealing with. So especially COVID has made it even harder to gather these kinds of stats. But in 2021, there was over 600,000 cases of confirmed child abuse cases nationally. So if anybody is a football fan in here, 600,000 cases would fill 10 NFL stadiums, unfortunately. 20 to 25% of those cases were child on child. As I said before, 77% of those cases, the child was being victimized by a parent or caregiver. And in 90%, and this stat has not changed very often from year to year, but 90% of child abuse is carried out by a person who is already known in some way to that child. So that could be family member, that could be a neighbor, that could be somebody in a school, that could be a coach, any kind of something like that. And that just kind of goes to also help dispel this idea that the only people we have to be worried about for our kids are these, scary men in these white vans that are, driving around and snatching up children. And while that can happen, and there are cases of that happening, the majority of these cases that are happening are following a grooming process. They're already tied in some way to these children, and it would be naive of us to think that the only people we have to be worried about are strangers for our kids. Kind of going along with that again, just to touch on sexual abuse, I say this because I think at least, before I really started diving very deep into this work, I believe I had the idea that most of these sexual assault cases, right, were happening to kids who are maybe just getting onto college campuses and, just getting out of high school and are, all coming together on these campuses, and we're seeing a lot of sexual assaults there. While that is the case and that is happening, the average age of a victim of sexual assault is actually 14. So it's something that we have to realize is happening younger than we might have expected at the beginning. And unfortunately, it's happening to more kids than we may think. Currently, it's estimated that 1 in 10 children will be affected by contact sexual abuse in their lifetime. And to break that stat down even farther, that would be 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. Unfortunately, just a couple of years ago, that stat for boys was 1 in 7, and that has dropped down to 1 in 6 now. Another important thing to note is that, unfortunately, any child with any kind of intellectual disability is at a much higher risk to be sexually abused in their lifetime. It's very unfortunate. It is very hard to even get some kind of numbers on this because of the intellectual disabilities. And sometimes, unfortunately, these children do not have maybe the verbal skills to even voice what's going on. And that's why it's so important for us to be armed with this information, so that we can maybe try and recognize things if they cannot verbalize it to us. So I bring this page of mugshots, and normally if I'm out in the community, I stop for a second and I ask people to tell me who in this lineup they believe is being convicted of a crime against a child. If anybody would like to pop on real quick and take a guess or take a gander, this isn't a got you, it's just a, conversation starter.
I believe all of them would be convicted because I don't think that there's a look to who's a predator.
Nikita, was that you that said that?
Yes.
Yes. So you are absolutely 10,000% correct. There is no model of what these people that are doing these things to children look like. It spans all ethnicities, it spans all ages, it spans all sexes, it spans all sexual orientation. There is no, perfect person that you could, walk down the street and pick out who is doing these things to children. All of these people on this page have been convicted of some kind of crime against a child. So awesome. Thank you, Nikita, for bringing that to light. And you are 100% correct. So something that we need to discuss too is, if all of this is happening and the stats are so high, then how is it happening? And there's no playbook that the people that are abusing children, especially the people that are sexually abusing children, are following. But we have seen, as people in this field who are, studying this and trying to find out how this is happening and how we can stop this from happening, we have seen similarities in a lot of cases, and 98% of cases of sexual abuse will have some type of grooming happening in that process. it is often not just one isolated incident. It is often not just something that somebody wakes up one day and decides to perform a sexual act on a child. There is a process that goes along with that. So these people are going to be looking for a victim, right? So they're unfortunately pretty smart people. They are looking for children that are vulnerable. They are looking for children who maybe do not have the most supportive home life. Maybe they are a child that does have a lot of time on their own. Maybe they're feeling it's a child that's isolated from other peer groups. It might be a child that is struggling with their sexual identity, perhaps, and is feeling, unsupported by their family and people in their life. So these abusers are looking for those kids. Then they're going to be wanting to gain access and isolate that child. They're going to be looking for ways to spend more one-on-one time. And unfortunately, the people that are committing these acts are putting themselves in position to make it easier to commit these acts, right? So they are playing it smartly. A lot of times they're often very charming people. They are very friendly, they're outgoing, because that is how they kind of have to play the game. They recognize that, parents are not just entrusting their children, or caregivers are entrusting their children with just anybody off the street. So they do have to gain that access and isolate that child. And that comes from developing trust with not only the child themselves, but the people around them as well. That could look like, maybe offering to drive a child that is not theirs to soccer practice one-on-one, and having that alone time. Maybe it's taking them for free babysitting, without being asked. And can people just be nice people that are offering this? Of course, but it would be naive of us to not just be mindful of something else that could be happening. So then during that process, the abuser is going to start to try and desensitize the victim to sexual and physical contact. So this could be what we're seeing more now too, with technology being on the rise, is maybe communication via phones, so texting or DMing, and kind of trying to turn conversations into more of a sexual nature, just to see how far they can kind of toe the line. Maybe it's sharing sexual content, like a pornographic video, and kind of seeing how that child reacts. Do they tell somebody about it? Are they keeping that to themselves? Are they comfortable to continue conversation after something like that is shared? With the physical contact, maybe it's a hug that lingers a little too long, and maybe the hands go a little too low. Maybe it's a rub on the thigh that just goes a little too high. And this is all usually very calculated. That abuser is looking to see how far they can take it without the victim pushing back. Because then unfortunately that continuation of that process oftentimes leads to the actual abuse itself. But that is not usually the end of this process, because once the abuse has occurred, now this abuser has to maintain this relationship with this child, whether that's by, bribery and gifts and showering this victim with love and affection to kind of show that what was happening was not abusive, or it can go the other way. This is sometimes where we're seeing threats occur, where abusers are threatening to harm families or harm friends or harm family dogs, if this victim was to ever share what happened to them. So we are going to, as I touched on a little bit before, we are seeing a big issue of sexual abuse online as well. And one of the hot topics right now is the issue of sextortion. So I am going to show you guys this little video about what sextortion is, just to kind of start that conversation, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into it.
Okay.
So this video too, just before I start, comes from the organization Thorn. Thorn is a national organization that does really great work in the online sexual abuse world and trying to stop that as well.
So you did a thing. You sent a picture of yourself with no clothes on. Something you thought wouldn't be shared. And in a polite society, cats wear clothes, right? Anyway, seemed like a good idea at the time, but now things have gone wrong, terribly. Maybe you shared the picture with someone you loved and trusted, but after a while, things weren't so friendly. Or they said they'd help you become a star. They just wanted to use you. Or maybe you met someone online and they really seemed to understand you. But then it got weird. And it turned out to be someone totally different. Now the person you shared the pic with is demanding more and threatening to tell. That's sextortion. Yep, that's a thing. The perpetrator relies on you feeling ashamed and keeping quiet. But they are the ones who should be ashamed. What they are doing is wrong. And it's never too late to find your voice to ask for help, or too early to reach out to your friends to tell them you'll be there no matter what. In fact, you can stop sextortion before it starts by talking about it now. With support, you can do anything, and you can focus on the important business of being parents. So tell your closest friends today you've got their back no matter what.
Okay, so as I said, that just goes a little bit deeper into that side of things as well. So let's continue on here.
Okay, so you did a thing.
Give me 1 second. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. So diving a little bit deeper into that too, sextortion is an issue of exploitation that we are seeing our kids struggling with online now. It can happen between children that know each other, and it can happen between, you know, a child and an adult that they already know in their life. But we are also seeing that there are sextortion scams happening all around the world nationally that people are doing just to gain money. So we are seeing now more than ever that when this stuff was first coming out, we were seeing mostly it was girls being targeted online. And a lot of the time, the way it would happen is a young girl would be approached on social media by an account that was seemingly, you know, a handsome young man around the same age as her. They strike up conversation, and, you know, this young man that she believes is around the same age as her begins to ask for sexually explicit videos or images. Now, oftentimes they would be shared because this young girl thinks she's speaking to somebody who's also her age, and that is going to be reciprocated. But unfortunately, all too often, this is where the flip would happen. And once these sexual images or videos were shared, the person would kind of show who they truly are and now threaten to release these images or videos if the females did not continue to send content or send money. What we're seeing now is that is still happening, but there are more and more boys being targeted, and the boys are being targeted more for the financial gain. So again, it happens a similar way. They're approached on social media websites, they're approached on gaming platforms. We're seeing it happen on Discord, on Roblox, on even Xbox Live. It can happen, and they're taking these conversations off of these platforms. They're striking up these conversations to get this sexually explicit content. But now they're friends on social media, so they have this person's social media friend list. They have, you know, maybe it's listed on there the school that they go to. Maybe they're friends with their family on these social media platforms, and these people are turning around, you know, saying, gotcha, kinda, and if you do not continue, if you don't send money now, I am going to release these images and videos to your family, to your school, to your friends. And unfortunately, as you'll see on this slide, it all too often is culminating by these poor kids dying by suicide because they just do not see any way out. and it's horrible. We have seen cases, I believe it was in Michigan, of a young high school boy who he was roped into a sextortion scheme, and within 13 hours had died by suicide because he felt so shameful that this had happened to him. He did not know, he didn't want people to know that he had sent images out because he thought he was talking to a female that ended up being a man. He was suffering with his sexual identity, and unfortunately he did die by suicide because he did not feel that there was any way out of this. At the end of today's presentation, I am going to talk about some really great things that can be used to help give these kids a light at the end of the tunnel, and that there is a way to fix these kinds of things. If I had a little more time, I would go through kind of all of these apps and just exactly, you know, what can be going on and what we're seeing and things like that. But just know, any type of social media, if there is any type of website or social media that has any kind of direct messaging system, these kinds of things can be occurring. Not only sextortion, also cyberbullying, the financial sextortion. It can be happening on any platform that there can be communication between different users. So that's just something that's really important to realize. So we are going to move on to some possible indicators of abuse. Now, these indicators could be indicators of physical abuse, contact sexual abuse. It could also sometimes be an indicator of online abuse as well, or sextortion and exploitation. Something important to note, though, is this is not a direct science, unfortunately. And as much as we want to be able to notice that something like this is happening, every child is different. Every child is handling these kinds of issues or abuse differently. So this is just things to kind of keep in mind. But again, it is not always going to mean that abuse is occurring, or if they're not showing these indicators, it doesn't mean that abuse isn't occurring. So absent from school and disengagement from school activities, physical injuries, mental or emotional health issues, maybe where that wasn't an issue before, maybe kind of seemingly out of nowhere. Somebody who may have been very bubbly and outgoing, now showing more signs of being withdrawn, maybe their self-esteem is now lacking, a lack of sleep, maybe for some of our older kids, or even, you know, unfortunately, adolescents, alcohol or substance use, inappropriate sexual behavior for their age. This is a big one. If there is a child who is exhibiting inappropriate sexual behavior and, you know, cannot be corrected, that could be a sign that there could be something more going on. That could also kind of be an indication of that problematic sexual behavior that we talked about before, that New Jersey has started this initiative for. Issues with bedwetting and nightmares that were not an issue before, inappropriate masturbation, demanding extreme privacy, chronic headaches or stomach aches. And the biggest thing is change in behaviors, right? So everybody in here has a kid in their life that they know and love, and you know them best. And if you are seeing changes in them, it's something to be aware of, and it's something to open up communication about, so that if there is something going on, they feel safe to come to you to talk to you about it. So with that being said, we're moving into disclosures and what they can sound like. If you are here from New Jersey, everybody in the state of New Jersey is a mandated reporter. And basically what that means is that if you have knowledge of child abuse or suspect child abuse, you are mandated by law to report that to the hotline. And I will have the hotline number up on the screen in a few minutes. And disclosures can sound very different, right? There is nobody telling, unfortunately, these kids that are going through some of these horrible situations how to handle this, right? There's nobody saying, okay, well, if this is happening, this is what you do. We're trying to change that with prevention, right? And understanding body safety and getting those conversations started so that they these kids understand if something like this is occurring, that is not right. But disclosures can sound all different. Sometimes it's very direct. A child will just up and say what might be happening. Sometimes they can be very indirect. An example that I use is sometimes my stepdad keeps me up at night. Now, that does not always mean, right, that something malicious is happening. Maybe stepdad works third shift and comes home at night and makes himself some dinner in the kitchen and is loud with the pots and pans. Unfortunately, on the other side of that, that could mean something malicious as well. Maybe stepdad is coming into a room at night when he shouldn't be. A secondary disclosure is if a child discloses to one of their peers, and that peer then turns around and discloses to an adult. That is still reportable. I often say I'm most comfortable, right, with my peers, with my friends. I'm comfortable to have harder conversations, maybe with my peers, than I would somebody who I see as an elder in my life or somebody of authority. And kids are the same way. So if they have a tough topic to discuss, they may feel more comfortable talking about it with their friends than with an adult. And the last is observation, which is pretty obvious. If you see something happening, obviously we would want you to report that. Now, one of the things that I'm really working hard to change is the little bit of I don't know if it's a stigma or just the fear of a disclosure for an adult, right? It is a really scary thing to be told by a child, especially a child that you love and care for, that something horrific is happening to them. It is tough. It is horrible. It is not an easy conversation to have. And I totally understand that. But what we want to try and do is look at this more of an honor that this child has chosen us as somebody in their life, as somebody who is safe to them, as somebody who they trust, and somebody that they feel comfortable enough potentially sharing the worst thing that has happened to them in their life with. So we want to look at that more as, okay, this is not scary for me. This is my time to be here for this child. And we just want to stay calm. We want to believe the child. We want to support the child. We want to be compassionate. We want to try and hold our emotions in the best that we can, because this child is already usually scared enough to be relaying this information. And sometimes if we are showing too much emotion, and again, I know it is the most difficult thing because it is something horrible that we're hearing, but sometimes if we are showing too much emotion, that can shut that child down because they don't want to upset the adults that they care about. And we want to take action. And take action is simply making those reports and making the people that need to know about what's going on known. We also just want to make sure we're not making any false promises. Unfortunately, we cannot guarantee at that point of disclosure that that child may never have to see that person again, because that's going to be out of our power. So we don't want to make promises to these kids that we may not be able to uphold. Okay, so now on to some of the more positive sides of this, which is prevention and how we can what can we do, right? So we look at prevention at all levels. So we look at primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. And I'm going to explain what those mean and what different avenues we can take during those levels of prevention. So the first type of prevention is primary prevention, which is ideally stopping child abuse before it even occurs. The ways that we can do this are sometimes easier than we think, because one of the biggest things is just being open in communication with what abuse is. So a child understands that if something were to happen, they understand that that is not correct. So that's going over things like body safety rules. On the screen here, I have a body safety rules magnet from one of our favorite prevention material organizations, the Mama Bear Effect. She is a survivor-led nonprofit that is really pushing to get these educational materials out to people and keeping it simple, right? So using the correct names for private parts, teaching kids bodily autonomy, that they are the bosses of their body. They control consent and their boundaries. When someone says no, we listen. Telling kids, making sure that they know it is always right and never too late to tell somebody if a body safety rule is broken, because sometimes kids feel that if something like this has happened and they didn't tell right away, that they can never tell, and that's not the case. We use books. So for younger kids, we use these awesome books, Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept. These are just a couple of my favorite. I have a list of books that we love to use. There's some great websites online. One specifically is NetSmarts. NetSmarts talks about online safety, specifically at different age levels, and kind of just some tips and tricks with that. Primary prevention is also, making sure if children have phones or social media, that those privacy settings are turned all the way up. That maybe we're delaying giving social media to our kids a little longer, right? Until we can really have these conversations about what can happen on there and how to keep ourselves safe. So that's some of that. Then we have secondary prevention. So secondary prevention is kind of identifying high risk areas of abuse in a child's life and implementing proper prevention practices in them. So I talk about the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts has implemented a ton of training now for anybody who is looking to become a leader. They have to go through specifically training on child sexual abuse before they can ever become a Boy Scout leader. Schools are putting in professional development to better understand abuse, to talk more openly about it, to do prevention work in schools. Something really exciting is in January of 2023, New Jersey passed Aaron's Law. Aaron's Law is now in actually I need to update this, it's in 38 states now. And this law requires that all children, grades K through 12, must have annually developmentally appropriate instruction on abuse prevention. And that's built into the curriculum. This also requires that all staff have at least an hour of professional development on childhood sexual abuse awareness and prevention. So it's, again, kind of not just sexual abuse. It should be all encompassing, but Aaron's Law specifically targets sexual abuse awareness and prevention. Then the final level of prevention is that tertiary prevention, and that's recognizing that even if abuse has occurred, there is an opportunity to prevent further trauma for that child. And there's different ways that we can do that, whether that is getting that child and family in touch with a child advocacy center to get them into some therapy sessions to hopefully start that healing process, whether they have explicit images or videos that might be up online. We can help them by informing them about this service, Take It Down. Take It Down was started by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It is free, it is anonymous, it does not require law enforcement involvement, and it is for anyone to use who is concerned about an image or video that they were 18 or younger in of sexually explicit nature being out on the internet. The only thing that the victim must have is the photo or video that they're worried about. They go on to the Take It Down website. This is a screenshot of the questionnaire that they fill out. They're just going to verify that in that content, the person was 18 or younger. Then if you move on to the next page, it's going to ask that the content be uploaded. Now I say uploaded in quotation marks because that can sound very traumatizing for that person, again, because this is exactly what they're trying to have removed. The image is not saved to NCMEC. They do not hold it. What they do is they scan the image for its digital cache. So each image on the internet has a coding that is behind it. This service pulls that coding and then runs that through all of their partner websites and agencies. So they are partnered with most big social media. They're partnered with multiple different porn websites and things like that. And if they find that digital fingerprint is on any of those websites, they remove it for that person. So it takes the victim kind of out of it. Again, it's free, it's anonymous, and it doesn't require a law enforcement report if that is something that is a barrier for them. But other than that, this is where I'm going to leave you. So here are this is our Ginnies House information, my specific information if you have any other questions and you want to reach out, the child abuse hotline, the Sussex County DCP&P office, and the Sussex County Prosecutor's office. And I think we are also going to be opening it up for questions.
Yes, definitely. I will stop the recording in a minute. Belle, I just wanted to thank you and Ginnies House for this presentation. Thank you for your time, and thank everyone that joined us today. This video will be available on the Family Partners YouTube channel by next week. So if you wanted to share this with somebody, you can feel free to go and direct them to the Family Partners website. Let me just
Thank
stop
you
the
so much, Diane.
recording. You're welcome.